Huge news for the Montreal Canadiens, and on the first day of July, Canada Day, Kent Hughes and Jeff Gorton pull a big move as Joel Edmundson is traded to the Washington Capitals for some draft compensation. We'll be breaking down the whole trade, what we think of it, and how we think it might impact the Montreal D-Corps moving forward. And speaking of the Montreal D-Corps, we also have an interesting Instagram post from Logan Mailloux hinting that it sure seems like he'll be headed to Laval next year. So let's just get right into this edition of Habs Digest. The first thing, Jesse, big thing. Joel Edmundson traded to Washington. Now, we knew Joel Edmundson has been on the trading block for, months, if not like over a year at this point, but it's now official. Darren Dreger says Joel Edmundson traded to Washington, draft picks to Montreal, and I don't have the screenshots of the exact compensation, but we'll say it here. Washington sends a third-round pick, originally Minnesota's third-round pick, for 2024, and a seventh-round pick in 2024, so next season, for Joel Edmundson at 50% retained, so Montreal holds on to $1.75 million of his 1 year left at $3.5 million. Jesse, I think this is kind of the perfect trade. It opens up a nice roster spot, so the Habs, defense situation isn't as clogged as it was last year, and Washington gets that kind of veteran playoff defender that they're looking for. I think it's a win-win for both teams. What are your thoughts on this move, at least your first impressions?
I agree with you, Josh. We're seeing a changing of the guard in Montreal, and I really think that's what it comes down to is Joel Edmundson. Obviously we thank him for his time as a Montreal Canadien. Obviously, we remember how big he was on our drive, getting to the Cup Finals. And that type of physical brand of hockey, right, is great for the playoffs. But I think Kent Hughes, kind of wants a little bit more of that new school type of defenseman, as we saw with the recent drafting of Reinbacher, right? Is we really want to have a little bit more of that offensive focus with our defensemen. First kind of starting with Kent Hughes, acquiring Matheson, who, with Petrie was kind of a similar style, but a little bit younger. But again, that more of that offensive type of defenseman, right? So I think we're really, Kent Hughes is really putting his fingerprints onto this team of how he really wants to be it in the future. And we had so many young defensemen, right, where it's like, I think definitely it's the proper move instead of getting rid of some of those younger guys where we're not quite sure how it's going to pan out, while Joel Edmundson obviously provides a lot of leadership, a great stabilizing force. I think this was the right move to kind of free up a little bit more room. The cap space is great, but that roster spot, I think, is probably the most important thing here.
I think so too, and if you look at it this way, they're paying $1.75 million and getting a third and a seventh round pick to free up a roster spot for their young guys, because you look at the D-Corps last year, right? Joel Edmundson was, kind of blocking a lot of these younger guys. Of course, we love seeing Joel Edmundson, but he's definitely lost a step, especially with all the injuries that he's had. He's still that very physical brand of player who'll be able to make a name for himself in the playoffs, on a really rough, scrappy team, but at this point, exactly like you said, Montreal's looking for maybe the newer school, that have a more mobile, faster, breakout defenseman, someone like a Mike Matheson, or even David Reinbacher. So Joel Edmundson leaving, I think, is just nice in general, because let's just look at the Montreal Canadiens D-Corps right now, right? So next season, on the left side, you have Mike Matheson, Cayden, Guhle, and then you might have Lane Hutson near the end of the season, but you still have Jordan Harris, and you still have Arber Xhekaj. So that's four lefties for sure, and then on the right side, you still have David Savard, Justin Barron, Jonathan Kovacevic, and you still have Chris Weidman, who's probably going to be there at the end of the defense. So you still have 8 defensemen. Weidman probably won't complain if he doesn't play him, and you probably have that Kovacevic, Harris, and Xhekaj rotating in that 6th defenseman spot, kind of all maybe sitting out one game at a time, while I think maybe Xhekaj would be more likely to play more than those other guys. But I just think that it's a lot nicer, it's a lot cleaner, Jesse. Do you think, though, even with this awesome young D-Corps, do you think that the Habs are going to look to maybe move one or two more? Because again, as we're going to talk about Mailloux in a few minutes, and someone like Hutson, someone like Reinbacher in maybe just a year coming to Montreal, there's still going to be a backlog next year. Do you think they're going to try and push these guys to play more to up their value? Or do you think they're just kind of going to ride out with what they have right now?
Well, you have to think that these young defensive prospects for the Habs, that they're well aware of this. Mm-hmm. And this is actually what's so nice about us collecting so many prospects over these last couple of years, is that it just creates such amazing internal competition, right? Which just brings out the best in your players. So absolutely. I think, with this year, what's great about this, like you said, Josh, is it allows our roster to start being a little bit more stable. Okay, we know where this person's going to be. We know where this, and I find that that's kind of important, especially with a young team as well and with young players. But at the same time, I really think that we're going to have to make a move soon enough, and they're going to be assessing over the course of this year who's going to be a part of this team in the future, right? We're lucky to have some really great players, and while I love Xhekaj, it's like I'm not quick to rule out what Harris could be in the future as well, right? You don't want to make these decisions too hastily. So I think another year in their maturation, we're going to see a big uptick in their play, and the Montreal Canadiens, we're going to benefit from that competition quite a bit.
Yeah, I think we're going to start seeing some people really stand out. They're going to see, this is our time to shine, right? Someone especially like Justin Barron, who had some ups and downs last year, was in the AHL, came back, made a bit of a name for himself offensively, played a bit of power play time, right? So he's really going to have to step up this year, but now he's one of your main right-handed shot defensemen, right? It's Savard, it's Barron, and it's, I guess, Kovacevic are really the three right-handed defensemen we have, so it's going to open up a lot of space for these guys, like you said. And some people are going to show out, some people aren't. But again, having these young guys, the potential in the future, there's always room to move these guys if you need to make space. So it's definitely going to be something interesting to check on in the future. But quick note too, I think we said this a bit earlier, but a big thank you to Joel Edmundson, right? He was such a key piece for that Cup Finals run. And I know he wasn't as what you all wanted in the last couple of years, but to see him go is a bit sad. So shout out to Eddie. You won't be forgotten as a Montreal Canadian. Let's get into our Logan Mailloux news, Jesse. I mean, it's essentially confirmed now that he's going to be in Laval next year, and I'll show you what I mean. So he posted on Instagram a little bit of a thank you. Thank you for all the memes at London Knights. Good luck to the 20s moving on. Hashtag Danny California. But anyway, people are saying, hey, does that mean you're coming to Montreal? And you got a red, white, and blue in the comments. But I think there's no other story than that, Jesse. I think it's almost certain if he's not going back to London, he's going to Laval. He's a big body. I think he's ready. He dominated the OHL. And I think we're going to see him on the Rocket just this year. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. The Laval Rockets are going to be stacked, right? And sometimes, for people like us kind of covering NHL teams, we kind of discount the health of our AHL affiliates and think that it doesn't really matter so much. There's a huge correlation between your AHL team, how you're developing, and also, with your pro club. And that's in any sport. That could be in basketball, that could be in the NHL. It's really important to have not only a great culture and environment at your NHL level, but also at the AHL. So with having so much competition there as well, it's just going to be amazing, bringing out the best in so many players. You think of who will probably be there next year, good chance Kidney, maybe Waugh, maybe Beck if he's not there, Mailloux, so people are going to be excited to be going out to games to see the Laval Rocket play. And before you know it, they're going to be knocking on the door, right? This really is the changing of the guard. I full well expect Logan Mailloux to be playing a couple games in the Montreal Canadiens lineup next year.
Yeah, I mean, I see a world where, especially if there's an injury or two, even just for a few games, you do something like you did with Beck, except maybe Mailloux would be a bit easier to call up from Laval for a couple games here and there if you need him. Another thing I wanted to say, this kind of ties back into the Joel Edmundson thing, Jesse, in other situations on a team that maybe doesn't quite have the defensive stability that Montreal has now, even though their defensive core is definitely not near the top of the league or anything, it's stable and they know who they want. If Mailloux's in a different situation where a team's losing a lot of their defensemen, he might be shoehorned into the NHL right away. And like you said, with some of the other prospects that might make that jump to Laval soon, on other teams, they might get shoehorned into the NHL right away. So I don't know if it's a conscious decision by the Montreal Canadiens to force these guys to go to Laval, but I think it's the right way to do it, right? The progression from the OHL to the AHL, develop your skills even more in the pro game, get used to it, and then jump to the NHL as opposed to being forced in there right away. I mean, we saw them say, hey, no, Slafkovsky, we genuinely think you're ready. But some other guys, I feel like this could really, really help their development.
Absolutely. Patience is a virtue, and physically, he's ready to play in the NHL. But that's what's nice about having so many of these prospects doing good drafting again, is that you don't have to rush your players. You can kind of see what you have. You're able to make good assessments. You're able to properly determine what your assets are worth by getting to first get them play at the NHL level and really get to see firsthand. So, I mean, it's really amazing to see, and I'm all for really taking our time. I think you should definitely get a couple games in with the Habs this year, but the majority definitely should be spent in the AHL. I think it's better to really let them marinate, you know what I mean, than to kind of get them on the pressure cooker a little bit too quickly. So, that's it. So I think as a rule of thumb, just a good modus operandi. So I'm definitely happy that Kent Hughes will be doing this.
Yeah, me too. It's going to be awesome. Laval is going to be exciting next year. Now, of course, I'm moving to Quebec. I'm in Quebec City, but maybe I'll drive down for some Habs games. Maybe I'll go for some Laval Rocket games too. Maybe a bit cheaper and get to see some of these prospects in action. So we'll see how it goes. But yeah, I'm about as excited as you are. That'll do it for this news edition of Habs Digest. We might have another one today. We're not really sure. It all depends on how much Habs news comes out. And if there is news, this is going to be the spot to come get your breakdowns and everything you need to know. I'm Josh Gosse for my co-host Jesse Poirier. We'll catch you in the next one.